Hello, friends. This is Catherine Marie, and you are listening to Long COVID Real Talk podcast. In the episode today, I wanted to go over how you know you have long COVID, because I realized by talking to someone the other day that there probably are a lot of people who are thinking that they might have it and are not feeling much better after having COVID, or they thought they were fine and now they're not feeling fine. The first thing I wanted to say about this is that it can be really tricky. When I was practicing as a nurse practitioner, there were so many people who I saw in same-day clinic who had symptoms of long COVID, but long COVID is they call it a diagnosis of exclusion. So in other words, you have to exclude pretty much every other possibility before you say, okay, I guess they have long COVID. And the way that they do this is by looking at all of the current diagnoses and medical issues that you have, and then running a bunch of tests, usually a chest x-ray, blood work, that sort of thing, to make sure that it's not something like your thyroid or something like anemia or issues with your metabolic panel, vitamins and minerals, levels are off or something. So Western medicine only measures certain things. I know functional medicine providers measure other things, but it's really, no matter what type of practitioner you're working with, it's really, really hard to say for sure that someone has long COVID. So I am reading from a book called Long COVID Treatments to Do at Home Right Now by Charles Kilmer, Kilmer, because they have in here a little section about the common symptoms of long COVID. So see if this is you, and I will kind of insert my own experiences in here. So originally when the CDC first reported on long COVID, there were about 8 symptoms, and now there are over 200, and each person has different symptoms, which makes treatment difficult. And also, I would argue it makes diagnosis difficult as well. So the problems that occur after recovering from long COVID or from COVID-19 can last weeks, months, or even years. In July 2021, the U.S. government escalated the status of long COVID, and now it is a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And in England, employment compensation is offered by way of personal independence payment. And on the bright side, for many, I would hopefully say even for most, long COVID symptoms improve over time. And also, for some, long COVID can last for months and escalate into a chronic health condition. For these folks, the Americans with Disabilities Act will be very helpful. So these are the varied and evolving symptoms of long COVID. Okay, the overall ones that I think are the most troublesome are, for me at least, are the fevers, the symptoms that get worse after physical or mental effort, called post-exertional malaise or PEM, and fatigue or tiredness that affects daily life. So as far as the fever, technically I know that a fever is greater than 100.4, so I don't always have a fever, but I will have an elevated temperature of 99.5 to 100.5, pretty much every day. And it's not all day. I can just tell that after I exert myself a little bit, then I will have a period of time when I start to feel flushed, and I'll use my ear thermometer and take my temperature, and it will be usually over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. But this is all the time, so I'm just trying to learn how to pace myself better, because it's the only way, the elevated temperature is the only way that my body really gives me feedback in real time, so I try to listen to it. The symptoms get worse after physical or mental effort. So this means, for example, I hate to say it, but after making an episode, even though it's only 10 minutes or 15 minutes tops, I will feel tired and probably need to take a nap afterwards. When I went to a birthday party recently, I had to talk to people, and usually I love talking to people because I am an extrovert by nature and I just love talking to people. But unfortunately, after a while, even the smallest exertion in conversation, talking to people, and my brain starts to get very, very tired very, very fast. And the same with physical exertion. Just sometimes it can be as little as loading the dishwasher or sticking a load of laundry from the washer to the dryer. But it's just extensive worsening of symptoms after any physical or mental effort. The post-exertional malaise and the debilitating fatigue are probably some of the most common symptoms of long COVID. And the fatigue or tiredness that affects daily life. So when I was just realizing that I had long COVID, and thankfully I had a sibling, well, I shouldn't say thankfully because that's not very nice for her, but for me it was helpful to have a sibling who already had long COVID because it made me realize much more quickly that I had it, because I had somebody telling me what the symptoms were and I had watched her for several months dealing with it. So she would say, you just face plant on your bed, you can't move, you just sleep for hours on end, you're so tired that you can't eat or go to the bathroom, you just lay there on your bed. And it's true. That's what it's like. It's really, really exhausting, and it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever had mono or mononucleosis, also known as Epstein-Barr virus, but a lot of people will have it when they're younger, in their teenage years or so, and it's the type of virus that you have for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's the type of thing where you would get stuff sent home from school. When I was growing up, I remember if someone had mono, they would have their school stuff sent home to them because everyone knew they weren't going to be in school for a really long time. And eventually they would get better after several weeks. But the fatigue is such that after you load the dishwasher, you need to take a 3-hour nap, or for instance, when I was trying to work full time with long COVID, basically what I did for about 1.5 years was I went to work, I would try to sleep on the floor if I was at work, or try to find a couch or something somewhere, which was hard to do. Or at home, if I was able to work from home, I would sleep in my own bed any chance I could get when my work was done. And then the moment I was off work, I would fall asleep. And it was just really intense. I would sleep all weekend. I would sleep at lunchtime. It was just like you couldn't catch up on sleep. And when you would wake up, at least for me, I feel okay for a little while, but then after a very short time, you're exhausted again, and you don't know why, because you haven't done anything that would warrant that. But that's how long COVID goes. So long COVID, to me, my experience, it is like having the flu, because you have malaise and body aches and you just feel like complete crap, like you do when you have the flu. And you also have this debilitating fatigue that you just don't even know how to explain it to people because it's so severe and it sounds so insane, and most people haven't experienced anything like that before. So I don't know, it's just really hard to explain to other people. Okay, so let's go to some other symptoms. So respiratory and heart symptoms: heart palpitations, chest pain, cough, difficulty breathing, or shortness of breath. I know that a lot of these things are symptoms of if you have a heart condition or if you have asthma. And I know that people will, well, at least with me, I feel like they are very quick to say, oh, well, you're just overweight, you have asthma. They kind of quickly want to come up with a reason why you would have the symptoms instead of actually looking for why you really have the symptoms. Because the reason why is because it's easier to just kind of say, oh, well, it's just because you are overweight and you have asthma, not because you might have this horrible post-viral illness that we don't know how to treat, really. But anyway, the difficulty breathing, shortness of breath, yes, a lot of people who have long COVID do have asthma. A lot of people who have long COVID are female. And the heart palpitations, chest pain, yes, some of it can be from anxiety because long COVID is debilitating as far as fatigue, but also mental health. But it's not a mental health thing. The heart palpitations are not solely from anxiety. They occur, and then you also feel anxious because you're having heart palpitations, so it makes it worse, But it's not like you're just imagining them or you're anxious and therefore having them. But there is definitely, in my opinion, a feedback system where you have palpitations and then you feel nervous, and it definitely doesn't help. They just kind of swirl around together and make everything worse. So the next is neurological symptoms. These are really, really tough. And I've heard a lot of people experience these things. And I've had people tell me that I must be in early menopause because why else would I have these symptoms? But, excuse me, again, it's easier to blame something that's common and possibly obvious, but it's not. I went to see my OBGYN and was informed that this is not from early menopause, but some people do have these symptoms of early menopause, and some people have these symptoms because they have long COVID. And I would say the memory issues, the brain fog issues, they are not unique to long COVID, but their severity, I think, is unique to long COVID. So the neurological symptoms include difficulty concentrating or thinking, like brain fog, headache, change in taste or smell, dizziness when you stand up with lightheadedness, pins and needles feelings, especially in your arms or legs, depression or anxiety that's getting worse and worse, or new onset depression or anxiety if you hadn't had it before, and sleep problems. For digestive symptoms, the things that I have read about and seen and experienced include becoming full very quickly, vomiting, nausea, diarrhea, constipation, stomach pain. I've also seen that some people have difficulty emptying their bladder. And then other symptoms, changes in menstrual cycles. I know that a lot of people who got the vaccines also experienced this, but long COVID also definitely has a profound effect on the menstrual cycle as well. Joint or muscle pain, for me, I usually feel really, really heavy. Like my arms and legs are so heavy, and it's really, really hard to go up the stairs or to walk. And a rash. My experience of the rash is that on my face and hands, it's like there are certain parts of my skin where they've become more hypersensitive than they were before. And so even the smallest thing, I'll just develop hives. My sibling who has long COVID, my younger sibling, she gets horrible rashes where she's seeing a dermatologist. Thankfully, I don't have that, but I have other things that she doesn't have. So, but I've seen a lot of people with horrible rash issues from long COVID as well. And the other thing that I wanted to say about long COVID is that a lot of people who have it are women. I don't know exactly what percent. And it does affect people who are in their prime, like in their 40s or so. Let me see what this says here, because this is saying it a little bit more concisely than I am. Okay, so 50% of people who go to the hospital with COVID-19 end up with long COVID. Many people catch COVID-19 but don't go to the hospital. And of these people, roughly 20% have some kind of illness that lasts for months or longer. Sometimes the problems are small, like the loss of smell. Other times people suffer from a lack of willpower to do anything. Some people have become paralyzed. They are unable to get out of bed because they have no energy, and they can't handle any amount of physical or mental stress. And I would say this includes being easily overwhelmed by sound and light. The symptoms may go away. Patients may feel good for a while. They may think they're moving forward, but then the old symptoms return. They feel even worse, and failure to improve creates a sense of despair and a lack of hope. For many people, just making ends meet becomes a problem because they can no longer work. The stress of being unable to work then triggers their symptoms. The old are most vulnerable to COVID-19, yet long COVID does not affect the old so much. On average, it affects people who are 43 and in their prime. Both men and women get COVID-19, but the demographics of long COVID skew towards women. What causes long COVID? There is good evidence that COVID-19 debris or the COVID-19 virus itself causes long COVID. There's currently a worldwide community of long COVID sufferers. This book draws from the wisdom of this community. You can join the evolving conversation about your symptoms at Long COVID Problems and Solutions. And it looks like it must be a Facebook group. It has a picture of a coffee cup and an option that says join group. This book will bring you information you need to know how to feel better and get better at home. We will give you many actionable solutions. Take the steps provided in the order we provide them. Each step leads to another step, which leads to better health. So the order that they talk about in this book is 1, testing and treating for histamine intolerance. 2, talking about the body and its innate immune system. And the goal is to try different treatments to restore the strength of the innate immune system. And then they will talk about lowering stress, because that is what sets off the worst symptoms of long COVID. So it's a very thin book, but I've just really liked that beginning part because it kind of helps to explain what long COVID is, because I think there are a ton of people running around out there who are just exhausted and don't understand why. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you would like to reach out, the email is longcovidrealtalk@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook group. The link is in the description of the episode. And if you would like to either call or text, the phone number is 650-382-2217. Again, that's 650-382-2217. Some people seem to enjoy texting more than sending emails, but either way, I'm happy to respond. Please consider subscribing, doing a review, and sharing this episode with someone else, especially if you think that they would benefit from it and if you enjoyed the episode. And I think that's everything. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk again real soon. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.